To make animations look better and more natural, there's a couple things we can do in After Effects. One thing I want you to do is wave your hand in front of your face right now. I know it sounds a little silly, but just wave it in front of your eyes. And do you notice anything about the motion of your hand? It's really blurry. That's called motion blur. And it's just natural that things in our natural environment, when they move, the way our brain processes them, there's a little bit of blur. What's different in this animation is that at every single moment, at every single frame, our square is perfectly sharp. And that's not natural when it's supposed to be moving. So you can add motion blur in After Effects, and that's one of these other columns in the timeline. It's this one with these 3 little dots. And if you hover over it, it's called motion blur. And all you have to do is check that button and enable it for our entire timeline. And that's what these buttons up here do. So you see this 3 little dots one, that's enabling motion blur. And so now you'll notice that as soon as I check that on, you get a little bit of blur on the edges of this square. And as I go through and scrub through, you see that little blur, and that's a little bit of motion blur that makes it look a little more natural. If I make this animation even faster, so I bring all of these keyframes into half a second, which I can do by selecting all, by clicking and dragging over, and then selecting one of them and dragging them to the left, and then play through this, you get even more motion blur, because the faster an animation, the more motion blur you get. Off, on. I typically like to add motion blur to most of my animations. The other thing that you can do to make your motion look more natural is playing with the speed. Right now, between these 2 keyframes, this square is moving and rotating and scaling up at the same speed throughout this entire animation. So from this frame to this frame, it's moving at the same speed as from this frame to this frame. But in nature, things ramp up. If you bounce a ball on the floor, it starts off slow and then it'll speed up, and then it'll go slower as it reaches its resting point. If you start running, you don't start running at your top speed, you ramp up. And so to ramp up animations, what we can do is called easy ease in After Effects. Let me just do that with position. So let me press P to bring up position. And now I just have my keyframes here. To add easy ease to a keyframe or to a set of keyframes, select those keyframes, or just for one, right-click the keyframe, go to Keyframe Assistant, and then choose Easy Ease. Or you can just select them and press F9 on your keyboard. So that's what I'll do. Now with that Easy Ease, you get more of a pop to it. It's that speed ramp, but it also has this sort of like pop action that I think looks pretty cool and looks a little bit more natural. If we extend it to 1 second, it'll look a little bit better. But you'll also know that now when I extended the position to 1 second, I didn't extend the scale or rotation to 1 second. So I want to do that. So what I can do to quickly bring up all of the keyframes for this layer is press U on my keyboard. And that brings up all the keyframes. Now I can take my scale and rotation and move it to the right to 1 second. And if I want, I can easy ease these other keyframes. So I can select all of these, press F9, or right click and choose easy ease. Now with that motion, I think it looks a lot more natural, and you can see it kind of slows into that final resting spot. In the next lesson, we'll take it one step further using an advanced technique that I think you'll understand. You just have to dive right into it, and it will help you change up the speed ramp of your easy ease.